Hello, and thank you all for joining us for this evening's book talk. The Love Your Library events program was launched to connect FIT students and community with industry professionals, FIT alumni, and authors. Our hope is to bring a larger world of possibilities into our community's academic experience, offering events that celebrate creative, diverse, and inclusive content through panel discussions, maker events, and book talks that reflect and celebrate the diverse interests of the FIT community. I'm James Ferguson, and I've been working at FIT Library for over 31 years. And for folks who are just watching and listening, please mute if you haven't already or haven't been muted. Now, today's presentation and conversation is about this beautiful book, The Costumes of Hollywood, with its engaging co-authors. I'm delighted to introduce you to my old friend, Coleen Scott, and my new friend, Larry McQueen. Coleen Scott is a costume designer and historian with an MFA in costume design from Boston University. She has worked for over 25 years in theater, opera, film, and television. She taught costume production and makeup for stage and studio at St. Anne's School in Brooklyn for 13 years. Her book, which you should also check out, The Costumes of Burlesque, was published by Routledge in 2019. She is tenured faculty and the head of the costume design, technology, and makeup programs in the Theater Arts and Fashion Department at Santa Rosa Junior College. Larry McQueen is a leading Hollywood costume historian and archivist. He has been a consultant for esteemed auction houses, including Camden House Auctioneers in Los Angeles and Christie's, both in New York and in London, where he's responsible for authenticating costumes and estimating their value. He worked as an archivist for MGM United Artists from 1999 to 2012, creating and maintaining a prop and costume collection from MGM Films. For over 35 years, he has curated the collection of motion picture costume design, one of the world's largest and finest private collections, consisting of over 600 film and television costumes spanning over 100 years, from 1920 to the present. And that brings us to this book. Take it away, Coleen and Larry.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I hope
Hi.
everyone's well. Thank you for joining us today. I know James has some questions for us too, but we were going to start in this slideshow just giving you a little introduction. If that's okay with you, James, is that a good starting point?
Absolutely.
So, Larry and I have done this a few times together now that the book has been out since July, and we like to give you a little background. So, Larry, do you want to just talk about how this started and this lovely gentleman to your right in the image?
I came to Los Angeles in the late 70s, early 80s, and I really knew very little about costumes at the time. I mean, I knew they existed, but when I first got to town and you would go through secondhand clothing stores, you would find racks of clothing that the studios were selling as Halloween costumes in junk stores. And even then I was like, this is not right. Now, and these are too nice to be worn for Halloween costumes. And at the same time, I met Bill Thomas, who was probably a little younger than I was, just barely, and he had been working with a group of people called the Hollywood Robin Hoods, who were assisting Debbie Reynolds in acquiring costumes from the studios who were closing down the wardrobe departments. And there was a series of people, and I have no doubt that in the beginning, their mission was to save Hollywood costumes. But as times went along, it sort of morphed into being more about money, making a profit on it, gaining power by having these pieces. And they started to get a little bit more brazen about how they got these things out of the studios. I've talked to people who ran the studio departments, the costume departments, and they said they knew this was going on. They knew things were going out of the trunks of the cars, but the studios were closing down their departments, and their livelihood was, being taken away and being destroyed and buried in landfill. And so they said, well, at least somebody understands that these things are historically important. But the group started to steal from one another, and it got a little bit more vicious. And so Bill decided he would get out of the costume business. And in 1984, he sold everything he had in an auction in New York. Now, on the evening of that auction, the FBI came in and they went through everything. They did allow the exhibition or the auction to happen, but he was so traumatized by it that he said, I'm never going to collect again. But he did start to work with auction companies, which were just starting, and realized there's profit in this stuff. So there were auction companies that were starting up, and he started to become sort of the expert that would go in and authenticate it and set up the exhibitions. And I was a friend of his at the time, and I was an archivist in a law firm, so I knew how to do that. And I had an advanced degree in technical theater, so I knew how to set up displays. And so we started working together, and he started to teach me how to look at costumes differently and to determine whether it's studio or not, whether it matches the pieces, and to authenticate them. And all this while, we were never allowed to collect ourselves. And I kept going, but I'd really like to. And so finally in 1989, a piece came up for auction, and it's a piece in the collection of Greta Garbo and Queen Christina. We both wanted that piece very bad, but there was no way we were going to be able to afford it separately. So we decided we would buy it together, but that meant we were going to we would be starting a collection, and we wanted to determine what kind of collection that would be and how it would be different, and how we would bring back a respectability to the idea of collecting costumes, because it wasn't respected at the time. And so we came up with these things that it was not going to be about money. It was not everything would be shown with the public. Everything would be as above board as possible, and it would be shared. And so we started the collection.
Yep, that was the beginning. And the slides that follow, this is a little bit of just what the collection looks like now, like how it is stored and where it's stored. James, did you have any questions about the collection itself, like the beginning of it or storage or any of that?
Well, specifically about how it got started, which you started to tell us. Is there something more you'd like to say about how that evolved?
It was an exciting time, because it was we were basically creating a new industry, especially with the auction companies.
Yeah.
I always had, and we also started to work with post-production companies that would take the post-production companies. We would put back together the star costumes, because hopefully we've got the costume Bible, which sort of explained everything. So we would pull back the star costumes, and then they would sell the other stuff that wasn't historically important off as shirts and pants and clothes to secondhand clothing stores. And so that was an exciting time. But even as we were working with the auction companies, slowly the prices started to go up and up and up and up. And especially when Planet Hollywood came along and they started buying costumes to use as table decorations for their restaurants, the prices took a major leap. And we sort of realized that this business that we had helped to start was going to turn around and bite us, and we would be priced out, which is pretty much exactly what happened. In 1995, Bill passed away, and I was left with the decision, okay, and at the same time, my job at the law firm had come to an end. So I was left with as a position, okay, do I start over at another law firm? I'm going to be paid a lot less than I was being paid at this one. Or do I try to make a go of the collection. And I decided to make a go of the collection. And so I started doing research. By that time, luckily, I had learned a lot. So I started to work with auction companies. And it was never my favorite thing to do. And then I got the job at MGM and did that for 13 years. And then at the end of 13 years, MGM was bought into by Spyglass Entertainment, I think. They came through archives and said, "We don't care about this stuff. It's not our films." And they sold it all on the internet. And I was devastated. I mean, I knew it wasn't my collection, but you get very proprietary about it when you do this stuff. And to see it go by. And so that's when I decided I will never work for the auction companies again, and I will never work for the studios again, because they really don't care unless it's worth money to them. And I decided to spend time on my own collection and pay the attention to my collection and continue to acquire things and go from there and do it and show it the way I felt it should be shown and taken care of.
And that's why there's a book now. There's a book now because Larry's particular collection is so well taken care of that these things have been preserved or conserved or restored in ways that are similar to what a museum would do to them. And they're primarily exhibited in museums at this point, because the way, let's see, this is also the loft. So these are just a few examples of other costumes that Larry has. This is a little exhibit of
Julie Andrews.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
It's all Julie Andrews costumes that Larry just did a tiny exhibit for funsies. Somebody was coming through, I think, right? Researching Julie Andrews, so you did an exhibit. But this is where they're stored now. I like this picture because it's like just a bunch of treasures. So when you come into the loft, I feel like it's just filled with treasures and not just costume pieces, but other pieces from film that Larry collected. And part of it's from your time at MGM, right? Like just pulling things out that you found.
Right.
So there's a lot of found objects in here that wouldn't have seen the light of day again, but they live on in the loft at this
Well, it was exciting because I mean the loft that I later purchased to store this stuff, because I mean, as much as I love this stuff, I don't want to live with it continuously.
Right.
You know, and so purchase a loft downtown, and so I'd have a place to work on it, and I'd have a place to show the things, and then I could go home and leave it behind. And so at the same time, I was working at MGM Archives, which is right across the river from where the loft was. And we would do films, and these set pieces would come in like Uma Thurman's table from Be Cool. And they were like, "We're not going to store that. You take it away, you can have it." So I would have the delivery people take it across the river and put it in the loft. So everything in the loft is probably from the back of a truck, but it was kind of fun to do. And it was a wonderful opportunity to get things and for little or nothing. And so it's been a fun place to create, and it's a fun place to come and do show and tells. And when people do come, like the Julie Andrews, I think it was for a student that was doing stuff on Julie Andrews. And so I set up an exhibition of Julie Andrews pieces for her. So it gives me a place to sort of play with the things and to see them again for myself, because they're usually always stored in boxes.
Yeah, this is what it usually is.
A long time ago, it's like I had learned from conservators. I mean, it's not just enough to have the things. You really need to take care of them, and you don't want them to be damaged on your watch. When we purchased things originally, I mean, they were always purchased with the idea of being shown in exhibitions. And so condition was always up front. It had to be in a condition that would withstand being put up. And it still had to have that same magic, that same feeling that it had. Because I mean, an old rotting dress is an old rotting dress, and it may have been important at one time, but it won't have that same emotional and visual impact. And so, to assure that it stayed that way, then we started putting them in acid-free boxes and acid-free tissues and Tyvek and all this other stuff that you have to do. And I learned this from people that worked in the museums and conservators, and it became an obsession with me. And now it's as much fun for me anyway to pack these pieces when they go out, um, because they're sent out like works of art, which is what I think they are.
I was seeing if I hadn't included the image of how you package these things, but it's just another, to note, more evidence of how they're stored. So it's not just the acid-free boxes, but things are wrapped in muslin or acid-free tissue paper and Tyvek and prepared in such a way that, it's FIT has its own museum. And so it's that same thing where you're trying to preserve the layers of fabric. You have to put padding between things so that fabric doesn't pleat or fold and crush and decay. So that is what Larry's done with this.
And then another reason I think I do it is because if you present it to a museum, hopefully, first of all, I only deal with museums, and I no longer do shopping mall exhibitions. It has to be a museum that has the staff to take care of it. And I always figured that if you present it to them as art, then maybe they'll treat it as art. So when things go out to a museum, you can tell someone spent a long time packing that thing. And then when they come back, they stay that way. So slowly over time, everything is packed okay and pretty well in the loft. But when they go out for a show, then they're done much better.
They get special treatment. Yeah. That happens. Do you have what's your next question?
Well, would you like to tell us about how the two of you met and how this book came about?
Yeah, how these two, we realized that we're two theater nerds. That's one of the things that ties us together. But Larry did a presentation about his collection for the Costume Society of America during COVID. And I watched that presentation and I was fascinated, and I thought it was just the most exciting thing, and I wanted to talk about everything that he had presented. So I contacted him and I said, do you want to chat about this stuff? And so we started connecting and talking about his collection, and Larry has a memory about me during that presentation that I don't quite remember, but it makes sense that I asked a question about whether or not he ever thought about writing a book or doing a book about the collection. I was inspired immediately, but certainly I didn't try to talk you into it. I don't think, Larry, for a little while. No. we chatted for quite a while, and I got to come visit the collection and see just some of the special things that were there. And I learned that he had photographed almost everything because that was a project during COVID. He's just so dedicated to it that I just knew that there was enough there and enough that had been documented well that we could present this, and that it should be known to the public. It should, if he was open to it, and he is, since his mission with the collection is that these things get to see the light of day and that the public gets to see them again, that a book would help do that to a broader audience. They wouldn't have to come see two pieces in an exhibition, but they could see more at once by having the book. So yes, we just built a friendship, and I had already written a book, and I said, you have all this. It's kind of here. It's all in place. It can be done. And he was, how were you, Larry?
I was good. First of all, when she first contacted me, it was, what I do is kind of very sort of solitary. And there's not, I mean, my friends certainly don't want to hear me talk about, buckles and bows and, you know, sleeve length and lace anymore. I mean, they're sick of me talking about that kind of stuff. So if anybody wants to talk about costumes, I mean, I'll go on and on and on and on for hours about it. So that started it, and I think when we shared a love for this stuff, and we shared a love for presentation, but when the book came up, it was somewhat hard, I think, for both of us because we knew each other, but we didn't really know each other, and it was like, was the other person going to show up and do everything that
Yeah.
we hoped was going to be done to get a book done? And I think by that time we had sort of developed a trust and realized that the other person would show up and do it, and so we did it, and it was an incredible, exhausting but incredible experience. The hardest part about doing the book was from the very beginning. She said, well, send me a list of things you would like to see in the book. So I sent her a list of 300 pieces. And there's about 650 pieces in the collection. And she said, well, now you realize that we're going to have to cut this down because this is not going to be an encyclopedia. This is going to be a book. So that had to be cut down. And that was probably the hardest thing to do, was to decide what we were going to show and how it was going to fall in within the storyline of the book.
Right.
And Coleen is expert at that. So I sort of, let her cut away.
We negotiated.
We
We
well, we did.
negotiated which
We
ones.
did.
So
We
we
did
have
negotiate.
some in here, that are favorites, and there were like some non-negotiable things, and then I had some too. But at the end, we ended up having to kind of slash and burn more. We probably wrote 150 entries. I think we definitely had set aside about that many just to have some wiggle room for arranging things, and to make the book interesting, and to make sure that it wasn't just like one chapter with 50 things and then not enough for something else. So the categories helped us decide things as well. But I mean, Hello Dolly was non-negotiable. That was going to happen. So that's partly why that was here. I don't know, Larry, do you want to speak to the Hello Dolly thing? Because that's also a foundation of the collection.
Right. The Hello Dolly. I don't have favorites per se in the collection. I mean, I have favorites for different reasons. Sometimes it's because of how I got them. Sometimes it's about the time it took to conserve them or restore them. For the Hello Dolly section, I have about 6-7 costumes. And it started because in the early years of the auctions, there were 9 original Irene Sheriff costume sketches for Hello Dolly. And we bought them all. And I was like, wouldn't it be cool if we could pull back the costumes for all those sketches? And we have done for 6 of them. And it was, and it also gave you, I mean, you don't know what pieces are going to come up. So you can wish, oh, I hope that piece comes up. It may not still even exist. So you kind of have to do it very casually as far as when something comes up, you create a new story. And on this, there have been several occasions where I went, I want those pieces to come up. And they did eventually come up. So for 6 of the Hello Dolly pieces, for some of the characters across the board, the lead characters, I have the costumes that go with the sketches. And that's fun to try to negotiate, and that's fun to create. Now the only thing is that they have to see the light of day in an exhibition, but they'll do it. They'll do it.
They will do it. Let's see what's next. Oh, exhibition. Speaking of exhibition.
Oh, yeah. This was an interest. This was such an exciting exhibition for me. It was because Bill and I always wanted to. Our goal was to show them in museums. And I don't even think at the time when we first started, we even thought, oh, they'll eventually make it to the V&A. I don't think we ever thought that. But anyway, this came up, and I think I had 20 some pieces in this exhibition, which was a big amount.
Yeah.
And I remember going to London for the opening, and the night before the exhibition opened, or then the night before opening night. I mean, I was in the hotel room and I was buzzed. Well, I was jet lagged too, but it was. I was excited, and we were on, and the hotel was only like 2 blocks away from the V&A. So I walked the 2 blocks. I mean, this was in the middle of the night, which is, you know, could have been safe, could maybe not. I don't know. But I walked and I sat on those steps of the V&A, and the sun was coming up. And I remember, and this sounds hokey, but it even felt hokey at the time. But I started sort of having a conversation with Bill, and I said, "We did it. We're here." And that meant the world to me, because our goals had been reached. This stuff was starting to be accepted as art, and it was being shown in very prestigious art museums, and that felt really good.
And it was 20 years, a little over 20 years from when you had started it. So
Yeah.
it was a lot of time and work that had happened before this exhibition. Yeah. This is from that exhibition.
Yeah.
This is the display they made, the V&A made for this dress, which weighs, I don't know, Larry, what, like 40 pounds, right, because it's completely beaded, glass beads. It's
a dress and then a matching duster. And the reason why it is reclining is because, I mean, the dress is in almost flawless condition, but it's extremely heavy. And the chiffon and stuff that is beaded on is, 70, 80 years old. So to have it standing up for too long would be too much stress. So I asked them if they could show it reclining. And so they created this form, which they actually gave me this mannequin. It's another mannequin I have to store, but it's raised up off the floor, so the mannequin is not actually sitting on the beads, right, but it doesn't have as far to fall, so you can show puddles of beadwork versus the dress as it originally done. And it also shows on the side there's a 51 karat star sapphire brooch. Now that is not the sapphire brooch that she wore. That was her own brooch, and I would never be able to afford a 51 karat star sapphire brooch and diamonds. But so a project that I started with a jewelry historian and a jewelry maker was to recreate important pieces of jewelry. Not to say that they are the real pieces, we don't, but so that when you see the piece, you could put any brooch on that you wanted to, but then people would look at it and look at a picture and go, "Well, that's not the brooch." Right. But if it still has the same feeling and it looks like it. So we go to great lengths to recreate these things. And it's a whole nother long story I won't go into about how you have to go about creating a star sapphire. I mean, we tried all sorts of different ways and ended up using a blown glass with a silver plate at the back that has the star etched in it, so you would at least get the star effect. And it's the kind of detail I like looking, and especially since what I do is so solitary, the idea of working with people who are talented and know things that I don't know, that's a big thrill to me, because then you can share idea. I learn something new. Maybe sometimes they learn something from me. So it's like, I love that collaboration, and I wish there was more of it. But it's examples like making the jewelry or making a book where it happens.
Maintaining, because Larry's been maintaining it by himself. It's just Larry doing this. So that's another thing. I mean, I think the brooches, the recreations of the brooches, and then you see the storage. Like when I first met Larry and I saw this care and dedication and the thought process behind it, I was not doubtful about Larry following through on a project like this, right? And I wasn't doubtful of myself being able to
Right.
follow through on it because I had done it before, so I could see it, I could picture it, and those two things together were necessary, right? And this is obviously something Larry is extremely passionate about, and me too. And you have to love the thing. If you're going to write a book ever, you have to love the thing you're writing it about, because you just have to spend so much time dedicated to refining it and organizing it and making sure and visualizing it and understanding what that final product is going to be, and what your goals are. And you could see that Larry has the goals and is able to execute, right? Like that brooch happened, and all these other reproductions happened because they tested and tried and experimented and worked together. So that it was clear that that kind of collaboration was possible, seeing these things that he's done.
And one of the nice things that I think it was about the fun thing about the book was that we got to, not only does it show some pretty incredible pieces from the collection, but it also tells the story of how it was put together. It talks about the jewelry. It talks about restoration. It talks about how to take care of it, how to pack it. There again, it's not an encyclopedia, but it does sort of give you an idea of how to take care of it and how to think about it and how to respect it. And I'm proud that we could include that, because it's like with the book, it's like I didn't do it alone, and I haven't done this collection alone. I mean, I've done it alone since, well, and I've done it since Bill passed away. But it was like there were still people that were behind me that said, "No, go for it, spend it, go ahead, buy it, you'll pay it off," you know. And so there have been people that have sort of helped me and pushed me forward. But it's those collaborations, and a lot of those collaborations are in the book, and those people are talked about, which I'm very grateful for.
We were able to do interviews with one conservator and a museum curator, the jeweler that has made a lot of these reproductions. And then we did a couple more too, maybe.
Yeah.
But those are some of the big ones. The book wasn't just about the costumes themselves, though that is the primary focus. It is about how this came about and how you can even collect, if you were considering doing it, or you have found yourself inheriting something that is amazing, how to take care of it, and make sure that it doesn't deteriorate, because fabric is a different kind of thing to preserve than other types of artifacts. So,
and it also goes into a lot of things. There's a small section on each piece of where the piece came from. It was either purchased at auction. Sometimes there have been pieces that I think some of them are mentioned in the book, where pieces were gifted to me. Now that is very unusual, and it does not happen that often. But it's like I had seen the movie The Piano, and I think they're in the pianos in the book, isn't it? Yeah, they're in the book.
Yeah. Just not in the slideshow, but it's in the book. Yeah.
But I saw that film. I was affected by it. I loved it. And it's like I pursued those costumes. And probably 2 or 3 years later, the costume designer sent me the pieces. She sent me two of the main characters, the daughter and mother, and then two of their sets of the undergarments, which play as much a part in the film as the outer clothes do, and then the two men in the show. And she gifted them to me, and it was because she had seen an exhibit where I had shown pieces, and she was so thrilled that somebody was doing this that she gifted me the pieces. So the book goes into all of those little stories about how the pieces acquired, and they're acquired in all sorts of different ways.
All different ways. I don't know if I went into both Cleopatra's, but this is one of your Cleopatras. I have
Right.
I think I left Elizabeth Taylor out, and I just mentioned it here, but you have this and the Elizabeth Taylor. This speaks a little bit to the organization of the book as well. You know, us not just the reason the chapters are organized the way they are, which is Oscar winners or nominees. That's the first thing. Then musicals, then historical garments, and then all that glitters. That's the sparkly things, the sparkly things chapter. And heroes, heroines, villains. We have some examples of those things here. And then for me, working with Larry, it was important to do a chapter that looked inside the garments. When I did my last book, that was important to me as well. And as a costumer, it's something you don't get to see very often.
Yeah.
So that's how we organize things. It was just important to me that some things were featured related to their construction. And so that's how we broke the whole thing down. But Cleopatra is in Cleopatra. This one is in the first chapter, I think, because it got Best Picture or a nomination, maybe. And it is this acid green that no one got to see in
No
real life
one.
because it was black.
Yeah, I had no idea. I know this movie and didn't know it was green before your book.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
exciting when you see these things that are in black and white and you finally see them. And you don't realize that they did a lot of experimentation on fabrics, shooting it in black and white film, and goes, does that look like it's like in what is the Scarlet dress, not the Scarlet O'Hara, but the Betty Davis
Oh, Jezebel?
Jezebel. I mean that was supposed to be sort of a burgundy, and it was like they did massive tests with fabrics to say, okay, does that look like what burgundy would look like in black and white? And it was basically, I mean, I don't know if I saw a piece a long time ago that was supposed to be that piece, and it was almost a brown, burgundy brown that had a reddish tint to it, but it
Wow.
wasn't burgundy, but it photographed in black and white like it would
Right.
be burgundy.
And that
And
red dress is central to the plot.
and
Like,
that's central to the plot.
yeah,
Yeah. And then when color came along, they had the same problems because, burgundy, by the time the film is processed, may not look burgundy anymore because of the way that the whole color transparency happens in Technicolor and all that. So they had to do experimentations. I mean, they not only had to do experiments on what photographed well on the film, but also the colors. There was so much they had to reconsider, and as the industry changed, they had to change with it and solve problems. And so that's why I so admire costume designers that have the ability and the flexibility to do this.
part of the job. Part of the job is the problem solving.
right. A huge part. Yeah.
What do you have for us, James? What's
I
next
would
on
love
your list?
to. I mean, we're already getting to 6:13. Feel free to show some more slides, and
Yeah.
then we'll have, maybe give 10 minutes or so for questions that anyone watching might have.
Okay, cool. I do have a few slides just of sort of favorites, but I threw this in there for you, James.
Thanks.
Death on the Nile in here, but just some pieces from iconic films or performances, just to give you an idea of the variety of pieces that are in the collection. And we do address that the Cleopatra is in there for lots of reasons, but we do address some of the things that happen in Hollywood related to casting choices that may or may not have been appropriate. Just opening the discussion on those things via the costume. So that's part of what's included in the book as well. But there's a few. Here's another. This is a favorite of mine, so I've included it in here for Gypsy, for Natalie Wood. And the bra image is there. Again, we're talking a little bit about interiors here, but the bra image is there because it allows us to discuss that bodies can be sculpted by the costume designer. So depending on what endowments an actor may or may not have and what they would like, the actor to have as part of their role, they may do some enhancements. And so you can see that this bra is completely filled with padding. And that's an example of sculpting. Oh, this is
Yeah.
we should probably talk about this piece just for a minute, Larry, for a minute,
Oh,
just for a minute.
just for a
It's an
minute.
iconic costume, but the restoration was really intensive for it.
We purchased this dress in 1989, and we had seen it at first at the Deanna Vreeland exhibition when she did Hollywood Glamour and Hollywood Glitter Glamour, whatever that
In the
exhibition was.
70s.
And when we purchased it, and we finally got it, we realized that this piece could never be shown again because it's solidly beaded, and it was on silk chiffon, and the silk chiffon had been uh, had rotted, and they had used this dress over and over and over again. They'd cut the sleeves off for an extra to wear in a film. They had cut the stole in half and wrapped it around their head as a turban, and they had changed the collar line and all of this. And that's very damaging when you do a solidly beaded gown. And then they would put it back together, and then where there were beads missing, they would sort of push the fabric back together, put some glue down, and throw some beads down on it. So you would have this huge scab of beads. And so when it came time to whether or not to have it restored, or restore or not restore, I mean, I was told to leave it as it was, which was a box of unusable beads. And I paid too much for that box of beads to not have it shown. So it took 5 years to do that. Everything had to be 4 inches at a time. And the bad sections had to, and luckily the only reason why it really could happen was I worked with the company who had originally been a part of making it, so they had the original beads, and that is the beads and minute rhinestones. I mean, it could not have been done if you could not have found those elements, and they had a lot of them, so it was enough to redo the dress. So it was a favorite of mine because of that 5.5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the only reason, it's the only reason that thing can exist and be seen by the public again.
Exactly.
This is another, but I love this costume, and it's another that we can discuss casting choices, but also discuss, Carmen Miranda herself being one of the highest paid actresses of her time, but kind of being pigeonholed into this role that wasn't her culture, right? But still a cultural icon in the US. So you could do a whole presentation on Carmen, but the costume itself does get seen quite a bit and can open up those kinds of discussions. These are some other iconic roles, important culturally as well for the actors, the performances they gave, like Diana Ross's Academy Award nomination for this performance, Anna May Wong, which is she was one of the only recognized Asian actresses at the time. And then this one's Nathan Lane, right, from The Birdcage. So another film at the time that was one of the first that was centering a story about a gay couple. So just iconic moments in film as part of the collection. And then this is from Heroes and Heroines mostly, but totally a separate take, a different chapter, different discussion, but also important moments in film, and maybe things that wouldn't have been seen ever again, like the Skeletor costume that Larry rescued. A lot of those Masters of the Universe, they're insane costumes. They're very impractical costumes. They are not for mobility. In the center, it's like sort of early superhero, but Robert Townsend was black superhero, like first black superhero on film, and Ruth Carter did the costumes. It's an iconic moment in film. And I just love the Hunger Games things. Larry has some pieces from that. So just showing that the collection spans well into the 2000s. And then here we go. And then Marilyn. And then we could probably take questions. There's a couple more images, but this gives you such a good idea of the range of things that are part of this collection. Larry, you can say your You have
my
a thing.
on
Mary has a little thing.
I have a little thing on Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe is never my favorite. I mean, I always sort of resented how, collectors and everything were. Judy Garland and Marilyn Monroe have such a fervor about them that it kind of turns me off, because it's like, well, there were other actresses that were good too, but it's Marilyn and Judy, and their pieces always go for the highest amount of money, blah, 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 blah. But I figured that if you were going to be a serious collector, you had to have a Marilyn Monroe. So this one happened to come up, and it was like, okay, I'll get that one. Took me 2 years to pay it off, but it was like I had a Monroe. I'm done with Marilyn Monroe. This is going to be in the Academy Museum is doing an exhibition coming up later in the end part of this year as her 100th year birthday celebration, something like that. And so it's being conserved now. They're doing some work on it. But it was called The Nude Dress, and it was all about the parents of her being nude, because it was dyed to match her skin. The total top part is totally sheer. So they're having trouble right now. I went and saw it being worked on the other day, and they're having trouble because they're doing 3D mannequins, and to get breasts that are realistic and not pornographic, which almost in the film they are pornographic, but finding that fine line so where it fits, and they have to be done so it fits the dress, not the other way around,
right?
Because you can't stress out the dress. So that's another thing, is that a lot of times the work that goes into not only the costumes, making the costumes themselves, but when they go up in exhibition, there's an artistry to actually making forms that look like real bodies, which give the impression of a body inside that piece that is realistic to what you saw on screen. So that's a whole nother artistic field, which I love talking to these people about and watching them do their work.
And then there's a few more, but
another one of the jewelry reproductions. I mean, and this was, I mean, the costume itself is glitzy enough. It doesn't really need a big diamond brooch on it, but she wore it. So,
yes, it does.
so we would blow up photographs. We blew up the photographs, and then we made it like we thought it was, and then found that's an old vintage 40s. What is the stone? The green one. What's a green stone? Emerald. Yeah, it was an emerald. So, and all of this jewelry that is done, it's so that they don't pin on to the costume anymore.
Magnets.
We do magnets at the back, and so that you don't have to pin through the fabric.
These are a couple of Sandy Powell's. She wrote the foreword for our book, and Larry has built a relationship with her over the years. And then just a nod to Debbie Reynolds, who kind of started the discussion about costumes being important and collecting them, and a shout out to the Academy Museum, where we just mentioned there will be an exhibit coming up. I'm pretty sure it's in May, the Marilyn Monroe exhibit that's happening soon. There are over 100 costumes in the book, so if you are interested, if this piqued your interest at all, that's a good place to go. Also, there's a lot on the website. A lot of the costumes are documented, so there is imagery, and it's a searchable site. Costumesofhollywood.com or filmcostumecollection.com, right, is your original. Yeah. So both of those will take you there if you want to see more. But we are here for questions if anybody has any.
Does anyone have any questions? You can pop them into the chat here.
I see you, Tetsuo Tamanaha.
Can you hear me? Ask. Yeah.
Coleen Scott.
Yes.
Hi, Ted. How are you?
Good. I'm so proud of you.
I'm so proud of you for being there. We went to BU together.
Oh, wonderful.
And what was that? Midnight Summer Dream. I think that was the
Midsummer Night's Dream. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a draper for my Midsummer and built stunning costumes for fairies, and they're my favorite costumes ever.
This is fabulous. I'm completely flabbergasted. All the movie stars that I really got I'm so wow. I wish I can really see that, And then as far as I can see it in the pictures, it looks very in good conditions. I'm
they
very
are.
surprised.
Yes,
Yeah.
they are. I mean, that's part of what Larry's tried to do, right? Is make sure that the conditions of the things that he purchases are good enough that they can be on exhibition, be seen. So yes, there's a lot of beautiful things. And if you come to LA, please tell us so that we can show you things in person.
Well, student, I think a lot of people didn't know this was a virtual event. So I went to the library and then was told this was a virtual. So I think a lot of students were not able to join just because of that. So I'm sorry. I should have, we should have known this more. But nevertheless, I'm very happy.
There will be a recording too.
Okay.
There's going to be a recording. Yeah.
Wonderful.
It's so nice to see you.
Yes.
Suku, you had a question?
Yes, I was wondering, since there is a resurgence of costume period movies, there's like huge fans out there now with all these like parties that celebrate films and shows. Are there surprises like the lesser known costumes that sort of like, met the trends? So it's sort of Regency wear clothing or costume that surprised you from your collection that was not as well known as Marilyn Monroe's, but now seem, the right in the context of what's happening in the movie.
Are you getting any requests for stuff that hasn't been shown, maybe because of these trends that are happening? I mean, the Sandy Powell stuff just got requested, which is because they were featuring so many of her historic garments.
Right.
Do you have any others that have been?
It's strange. It's as far as the contemporary surge of period clothing. I mean, it's getting much harder to get contemporary clothes now, because now the studios are starting to keep them and work them as long as they can work them. And then they'll probably, when they get tired of paying to store them, they'll probably dump them too. And so they'll eventually probably end up on the market. But it's getting harder and harder to get contemporary films that are dealing with period fashion. You don't see them as much. One of the things that I appreciated so much about Sandy Powell was she would call and she would tell me, Sony's selling these pieces out the back door. So, contact so-and-so. And then it made that able to do it. And I mean, because I love my passion is the period. Well, I have a lot of passions. I love beaded gowns, but I also like period pieces just because they're so different than. And but eventually they do come up. I just purchased one from Elizabeth, which I think is Kate Blanchett. So if I get a chance to get a period piece, that is one of my weaknesses. And also on the Elizabeth costumes, I have a series of Elizabeth I, depictions of Elizabeth I by
different ones,
starting from Young Bess with Gene Simmons, then up through Betty Davis, Quentin Crisp as Queen Elizabeth, and then now Kate Blanchett. So, and that was a thing that someday I want to see Hollywood as they depicted Queen Elizabeth over the years. We'll see if it ever sees the light of day, but it does excite me, and I love period. I love the period stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, it's nice that that's a conversation now. That there are so many period recreation shows out there, and then there's also the conversation of people going back and forth about not liking the interpretations, all the creative interpretations of the period that are happening, like Bridgerton things, and even Gilded Age has taken liberties with their stuff at this point.
And the Oscar went to Frankenstein, which was
Frankenstein.
And who knows what period that was, but it was absolutely beautiful.
He did
fantasy period,
a time period. It was partially fabric choices and those treatments of things that were even less period. She had silhouettes in there that were correct silhouette. But some of those fabric treatments were just not period, not color palette, not, and I think Wuthering Heights right now too is a really wild interpretation,
Yeah.
right? Because it's romantic. It's like a dream state. And it is not about, sometimes it's not about it being historically accurate, but they can be really interesting interpretations. And I just had a conversation with the BU magazine about this, about interpretations are fine. They're good. It's nice to see creativity there, but it is about knowing your research, right? Like having all that research knowledge and then consciously making a decision to do something different within the period. So it doesn't look like an accident. It's a choice. It's a concerted choice, right? That's what I think is important about those interpretations, is just having the background first and then veering off
Right.
consciously.
And I don't think Hollywood ever had the reputation of being period correct in any of their costumes when the period films. Example is the depictions of, Cleopatra.
You saw that Cleopatra dress, yeah.
That's 1930s bias cut. I'm sorry.
100%. And Liz Taylor's.
And
likewise.
Liz Taylor's is a 1960s evening dress. So it's like, and I don't think they ever did. I think some designers like, Walter Plunkett, he would try a little bit more to be historically accurate.
Yeah.
But even he had his things. I set up an exhibition once in the loft of a bunch of, somebody was coming over to look at Walter Plunkett's, and you set them all in a row, and you go, he always did this, he always did that, he always did that. And that's not true to period, but it was a look and it worked, and they always gave, they didn't want to stick somebody in probably a true historical piece because the audiences wouldn't respond to it or wouldn't feel an affinity or it wouldn't seem familiar to them. So they always sort of threw something in contemporary that, they possibly could wear themselves, because they were always into selling.
Possibly be in a department store after the film comes out. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
And they're doing that now too. With
Yeah.
And with these trends of people dressing in historical garments, there's a whole market, right, for that wasn't there, other than for theatrical and film people a while ago. Yeah. Thank you for that question.
Yeah. We're at 6:33, so if anyone needs to go, I get it, but I'll just toss one question here that Matthew Michael sent. What costumes do you have your eyes on that have been used in current movies?
Yeah.
And related, what is the embargo time that movie costumes must wait to be seen outside the movie?
That's a good question.
I don't know about the embargo time. I know when we were working in post-production, post-production isn't released to do whatever happens to post-production until they're sure that the film is not going to be changed. And they have to go back and do reshoots.
Yeah.
But once it's in the can and once it goes out and once the studio decides to sell it, and the studios are probably keeping them a little bit more now because they kind of realize there's sort of money in it, and they'll keep it for a while until it costs them too much and they'll sell it. But it's like, and as far as, so I don't really know if there is a time. It's changed. So I don't know, how soon after a production you can probably get anything. As far as things that, I would covet, it's from contemporary. There's a lot of things I would covet from the contemporary thing. But it's sort of like I learned a long time ago that, you can wish and wish and wish and wish and wish and set yourself up for, for disappointment. And I kind of wait for things to come up that resonate with me, and I make the decision then to take it. It's like there's no purpose in wishing for something that you're never going to be able to afford, or you're never going to be, or it may not even exist anymore. So it's sort of like you kind of have to do it as it comes up and at the spur of the moment in telling your story and keeping the collection going forward.
But
there's a lot I would like.
Yeah, I was like,
there's a lot I would like.
and was like, "Hey, would you like a Frankenstein costume?" I'm sure
Oh,
Larry would be like,
I-
"I mean, maybe, yeah, I would."
You
take
got
that."
it. You got
Sure.
it. I mean, and also it's another way uh, uh, to to honor the contemporary designers too. I
Mhm.
mean, it's a lot of the collectors. A lot of the collection is, you know, what starts in the 20s and what's the earliest piece is 1916, but it's like, but it goes up through the, you know, up through well it goes up into contemporary, but it was a conscious decision to collect contemporary designers because contemporary designers are going to be tomorrow classics. So
Yeah.
it's sort of like it when they were available, and it happened to be at that period of time in history, there was a lot of stuff from contemporary films on the market. It's not so much now, and if they do end up on the market, they have a price tag which I can't afford. So, and a lot of pieces are being given to museums and stuff instead of
Mhm.
offering them to the public. So,
Designers are starting to, be able to write that into their contract that they get to keep some pieces as well. So I think there are designers that are keeping archives themselves, and there are actors who keep archive. Like Glenn Close had a huge archive and donated it to her alma mater, and so I think there are more people within the industry trying to preserve some of their own stuff,
yeah.
which is a good thing because then they're out there, they're
Right.
safe. But yeah,
Right. But that is fairly new. I mean,
yeah.
when I first got in touch with Sandy Powell years ago, she was trying to do a retrospective of her work, and she had heard that I had some things from Orlando, and whether I'd be interested in doing an exhibition. That exhibition never happened, but it's continued as a relationship, and we are going to be doing a retrospective of her in London in 2028 or 27.
So that's like
But
an
she's
extension kind of the SCAD one. Like SCAD just did a retrospective of Sandy Powell, but the London one's going to be a bigger
yeah.
thing.
Right.
And she had said, you know, we had costume designers that always assumed that the studios just were keeping these things. And if we ever wanted to do a
They
retrospective of
thought,
our work, we'll
Mm,
just go back to the studio and they'll have them hanging there in order. And
yeah.
yeah,
that's not what happened.
No.
And so they're scurrying around. So some of them have gotten when you get to a certain level, you probably have the power to say, okay, I want a selection of costumes, and they probably can do it, as sometimes stars do the same thing. They
yeah.
get their own stars, but you have to be at a pretty high up position to be able to
Right.
do that.
I mean, we've been the social media page, like we have an Instagram page and there is the website, but the Instagram page has connected us to a lot more of these designers that Larry already had pieces from. And sometimes we'll get messages from them with our posts being like, I'm so happy that this still exists. Thank you so much for having this piece, because they thought things were just gone
Sure.
forever.
Yeah.
So that's happened several times since the Instagram started, and we started a podcast too, which we have done part of a season, and now we're going to have to go back to it in the summer because too much to do. But there's also a podcast where we're starting to talk about each garment that's in the book, so that the 500 or less words that we had in the entry we can expand upon in a podcast episode. So we have 11 episodes out. It's all called The Costumes of Hollywood. But if you want to know
Okay, so
more
people
about
can
that,
find that on all the major platforms.
Yeah.
Costumes of Hollywood.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's great. Wonderful. That seems like a good place to leave things. Thank you both so
you.
much. It's a
Thank
pleasure.
you.